Good evening, everyone. Everyone turn off their phones. And so welcome to the HAGAS November meeting. For this meeting, I'm delighted to welcome Graham Devenish. Graham has been a photographer for 55 years and held membership to local camera clubs in that time. Graham's passions nowadays includes astronomy and astrophotography, and tonight's talk is entitled Keep On Looking Up. Please welcome Graham Devenish.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me along tonight. I apologise for the slightly disappearing telescope in the background. It's exciting to find out when it will actually appear and when it won't, and sometimes my headphones disappear as well. Thank you for inviting me tonight. A little bit of background on my astrophotography. As Stephen said, I've been a photographer probably for over 55 years. And my main passion in the past was sports photography, particularly powerboat racing, and in particular offshore powerboat racing, from the late 60s right the way through to probably the mid 80s. But I've been a photographer anyway. I print my own stuff, and I've had an exhibition of my own work as well at some point. But since moving from the centre of Brighton and Hove about 8 years ago, one of the things I've always wanted to do from about the age of 7 was to do astronomy. And I remember when I was probably about 7, I had a magazine about UFOs. And I wasn't interested in the UFOs. I was interested in the article about how to make your own telescope or camera lens to view UFOs. So it was always the optics for me rather than the little green aliens. And when we moved from the middle of light polluted Brighton and Hove 7.5 years ago now to Worthing, where I've got Baltimore skies in my back garden, I was able to indulge in astrophotography. So what you're seeing is a bit really of the astrophotography side. So with no other interruptions or waffle from me, I'll share the screen now, and we'll go into the talk. If you want to ask, did you say there's a questions and answers at the end, Stephen? Yes. Okay. Right. Okay. So I'll go into the share. Right. Can you all see that now? Good. Right. Okay. So yeah. So this is called my original talk, which I did when I started. I got very, very early involved in Worthing Astronomers about 2018, 2019, and got quite, as you do, you get involved quickly. I did a talk called Just Look Up, and this is Keep Looking Up. So this is a bit of the further adventures of an astrophotographer. So the other one was about the first 6 or 9 months that I threw together to fill a slot in one of the evenings. But this has been developed a little bit more. And I've taken this around to 2 or 3 camera clubs. So it's probably more, I could tailor it the way I talk, but some of the images are probably more basic, possibly for you as an Astro Society. But we'll just see how it goes from here. So, right, so let's start with astrophotography. There's not a continuing theme of Lego all the way through. I think we've got Galilei here, and he discovered, of course, the 4 Galilean moons in 1610, I believe, and they are still the source of absolutely brilliant fascination for people. One of the things I love doing with Worthing Astronomers is like outreach evenings, and the number of wows you get from people seeing the moons of Jupiter or the rings of Saturn and stuff like that, and everybody always remembers their first Saturn moment. But I guess we've moved a little bit on from 1610, and what he would think of today's technology would probably astound him. Of course, nowadays we've got things like pillars of creation, the famous Hubble shot, which is an astonishing image. And it still stands up today. I mean, it's probably, what, 20 years old now, but it still stands up in terms of the quality. I know the James Webb has actually done something with this as well, but it's, you know, it's a standard to aspire to, I guess. Talking of James Webb, this was the launch day of the James Webb, and this was one of the last. This is a screenshot off the television. I thought it was quite poignant and sad, really. This was the James Webb disappearing from Earth's orbit, and the last time anybody in this planet would ever see, you know, a detailed picture of the ship that it's carrying, that is carrying the scope. Although for a couple of weeks afterwards, I believe that it could be seen as a dot in the sky. I think Sky Safari 7 was tracking it, so you could actually find the coordinates for it, and you could actually see this dot in the sky that was the James Webb, which was quite cool. Talking of the James Webb, this is, I think, one of the first pictures that came out of the James Webb. It's right, it's not going to be everybody else's pictures all night. It's just as a scene setter, really. So this is the Cygnus wall, and one of the first things that came out, and again just shows the level of detail that you can get. We are looking, of course, as amateur astronomers, of something slightly more basic than that. But before we go to that, we'll just look at this last one, which I think is just astonishing. And this was one of the famous pictures. I think Hubble did something similar to this, but this was, I think, a James Webb one. And when you think that they just picked a tiny patch of sky and just photographed it forever, and apart from the stars there, virtually everything there is a galaxy, and virtually every galaxy has got 100 billion stars in it. I'll let you do the maths, but if that's a tiny part of the sky, well, then what is the rest of the sky like? And it's just astonishing that there is so much stuff out there that we haven't seen or don't know about. Getting on to slightly more basic things, I said I lived in Brighton and Hove, and this was the light on is our kitchen light. We lived in a maisonette in Brighton and Hove above my parents-in-law. We moved there when my father-in-law became ill, and my wife by profession was a nurse. So we thought we'd live there for about 3 or 4 years until he finally passed away. He actually lived 23 years under the expert care of my wife and my mother-in-law. And then my mother-in-law got ill. So eventually our 3 years turned out to have been 32 years. So this is central Brighton and Hove on a clear night. And you can see how much illumination there is in there. I think it was about Bortle 9. But even in a Bortle 9, you can still see star formation. And you can see quite clearly Orion there. So this is obviously a winter picture. And I'm talking a little bit about Orion because it is such a... I mentioned that we're sort of doing a little bit of going through the seasons. So this is obviously in winter and sort of latish winter, probably because that's to the southwest by that point. So even in the brightest lights, you can still pick up some stars. And I believe that seeing the number of stars that's inside Orion is a way that they measure the brightness of the sky or the light pollution, depending under dark sky conditions, how many stars you can see within the confines of the 4 main stars in the corner. It tells you how light polluted you are. Of course, you can then move away to a little bit of dark sky. This was mid Wales, near the Newquay area in February, and the little green van was our van at the time, our little VW camper. This is my son's camper at the time, and I just went out, took a picture, painted the front of the campsite with a head torch just to get some light, and I think the main image is about 10 seconds with a wide-angle lens, and you can very clearly see Orion. I mentioned earlier the previous picture in the Bortle 9, you could only see here's Orion here, there's Betelgeuse, Rigel there, the sword of Orion there, the belt of Orion, and look at all the stars that are in there now that you can start to pick up in darker sky conditions. Incidentally, this holiday in February in the freezing cold and the rain was a reason we bought ourselves a bigger camper van, because my son had a dog at the time, but the dog decided to stay with us for the week. So we had a damp dog in a VW camper for a week. And after that, we decided we needed a bigger van. A big effect that astronomers have, and I guess an obsession of ours as well, is the weather. I bet if you had a poll, everybody would have more than 3 or 4 weather apps on their phones. And I've got, this is quite an old slide now, so it's been updated, and I've now probably got about another 7 or 8 weather apps, because every time I see a new one, I ask them where it is. And what's bizarre about it is they all say different things. So clear outside will tell me, as you can see on this next slide. So clear outside on the left at 2200, same night, at 10 o'clock at night, we'll say the total cloud is 100%. Scope nights will tell you it's mostly clear. And that's the same day, probably taken from the same data. So there's a saying going around in Worthing Astronomers that the best weather app is the Mark 1 eyeball. So basically look out the window, if it's clear, chance it, and then do something. Of course, where we live in the UK, and you're affected, well, you're not that much further north than us, the good old jet stream is a major player in giving us the stability for weather or not. And as you can see here, at this particular point in time, we had massive winds coming through, and that affects the stability, that affects the seeing, certainly for planetary photography. And even for deep sky photography, because very often with the jet stream, you'll get like a very, very high veiled cloud sometimes, but there's certainly turbulence, and you can see the turbulence when you look at things like the moon at night. I'll skim over this one because I mean, I'm sure as astronomers you know the difference between equatorial and Altaz mounts, but say this was put in here for Camera Clubs. So, but very, very simply, if there are any new members there, sort of you align to Polaris, and the equatorial mount tracks the stars on an even plane, whereas an Altaz, the best way I can describe it is it climbs the stairs. So it goes up a bit, left a bit, up a bit, left a bit, up a bit, left a bit, and so it does it in steps. And that's the reason why you can't have longer exposures with Altaz, because it's not such a smooth movement. And that's another very quick illustration to explain. Just an example, a couple of bits of kit. This is very early days. Oh, it was so simple in those days, wasn't it? Bought a second-hand equatorial mount off of a friend of mine. Lovely chap who I've known for probably over 52, 53 years now. He used to run the best camera club in Brighton and Hove. Sorry, the best camera shop rather in Brighton and Hove. And the scope was an eBay special. The camera was a second-hand one out of one of these dodgy little mobile phone shops, a little Canon EOS 600, which I got converted in Uckfield by a company that does it. And that's our current garden there. And that's with the Leylander Kevin that we were talking about, that's now gone on that side of that's been replaced by a 6-foot fence. So it's a bit easier that side. So again, that's fairly simple, taking pictures using an involumeter, and the rig sort of works. The iArptron is fantastic because it's very, very lightweight, quite easy to pick up, but because of its design, does punch way above its weight in terms of payload capacity. And Then after a while, I gravitated to an NEQ6, which is a heavier equatorial mount, which I think could take up to 20, 25 kilograms payload. And I sort of just looking. No, that telescope. I paid an absolute fortune for that. I paid £55 for that telescope. It's known as Ivan, and it's an old TAL Russian telescope, which is bloody fantastic. It has to be said. It's a great scope. I don't use it very often because it's a bit restrictive, because it's only got a 1 1/4 inch focuser, and to buy a 2-inch focuser would cost more than the scope is worth itself. So I've got other scopes to do the job now, but it still is great for things like outreach. Take it, and it gives great views of the moon and Saturn and things like that. And by now, as you can see, the fence has been made. Then we gravitate to putting the NEQ6 into a pier, and the pier goes into a shed, and it is now coming to the Astro shed. I decided to go for a shed with a push-off roof rather than a dome, because right behind, to the north of us, we've got farmlands, but we've got a bridle path, and a dome would look very obvious, whereas a shed just looks like a shed. So for security purposes, it's a little bit easier. But no, that's got a C8 on. I've just realised now the last 3 pictures we've mounted have all got different scopes on, which shows my butterfly mind that I can't focus on things. So I was quite pleased with that, and it's brilliant now because I just pop the roof and I can start imaging. The only thing I want is for ASIA to have a park position rather than a home position, so it can actually lie on its side. Of course, when you're building things like this, you're very dependent on the help you can get, and the quality of labourers is quite important. As you can see, I've got one very willing volunteer. She hasn't been seen since that hole was dug, strangely enough, but and the dog looks completely bored. And you can see that we actually, from that stripe across the grass, that we actually were testing out where to put the pier. And it was sitting there for a couple of months, which is why the grass looks different, because that's where the cable was. But yeah, it was the longest ever pier production in history. We started digging in March, and it was a really hot summer. I think it was 22. So we didn't actually get the concrete laid until September. And I can give you a very good tip for anybody who's thinking of doing their own pier. We used postcrete for the main hole, which basically you put water in and pour the postcrete in on top and it sets. But I thought I'd be clever and actually put it into a wheelbarrow and then mix it and then pour it in, because we could do higher volumes. Don't ever do that because it goes off so fast. I had a 200 weight wheelbarrow at that point. So it destroyed a wheelbarrow until 6 months later, in frustration, I hit it with a club hammer and it came out as a perfect mould. So I've now got some wheelbarrow-shaped rockery in my garden. So we're going back again. We're looking at, this is my view from the observatory. So in Sky Safari, you've got a facility where you can actually put in your photograph your viewpoint. So you can put it in so you can see where things go. And it just really is a night sky in January this year. And you can see at 7:45, you've got lots and lots of stuff up here. And we're going to focus a little bit on things around here. Certainly Orion, the moon, that little dot there, Neptune. So the southern sky is always very, very busy. And I don't have a particularly good north view. West is not bad, east is not bad, but north is awful. But south is good for me. The only problem I have is I have the sky glow of Worthing to the south. So looking at Orion, and again, we're going back. This is sort of a progression of an astrophotographer. So I don't hold it, my hand up to say they're all brilliant, but they show even an evolution. So this is a bit of the Orion Nebula in the middle, the tiny bit. This was with quite a wide lens, possibly 70 to 150 racked out. So you've got the 3 stars of the belt. You've got a little blob there. Then as you progress, you move in a bit closer. You want to see what's going on. Yeah, so you've got, this is from Sky Safari. So you've got Betelgeuse, Bellatrix, Rigel, Safe, and the 3 in the middle, and the nebula, and the little blob on the right-hand side, which of course is the Rosette Nebula. So moving in a little bit closer, you start getting a little bit more definition of detail of the nebula in the bottom, and you've got starting to get slight shadows of something going on, something interesting going on there. And it's also far away, and part of the reason I put this in, because obviously the Orion Nebula is 1,300 light years away. So for most space objects, we use light years to describe their distance. Light years distance, one light travels in 1 Earth year. So 1 light year is about 6 trillion miles. That's 6 with 12 zeros behind it. And again, this was put in for camera clubs, not necessarily that you need it, but it's there. What I found interesting was this slide, though. So we know that the sun is about 8 or 9 light minutes from us. 4.3 light years is Proxima Centauri, our closest neighbouring star. 320 light years from the North Star Polaris, and so on, so on. But what's interesting, saw something really interesting the other day, and I don't know how accurate this is, but Voyager 1 that got launched in 1977 is now 1 light day away from Earth, which is a huge boundary to cross. I mean, it's now in interstellar space. But so if they send a message to Voyager to tell it to do something, and it's a command and response, the response will come back 48 hours later because it's so far away. And that's something that was made by man with an 8-track and like more power, no more power probably than a ZX81 computer, and it's still out there giving information back. I think it's astonishing. The moon I love, and you'll see quite a number of pictures of the moon within this presentation. We're starting to now move on to some of the stuff that I'm taking pictures of. This actually won 2nd place in the South Downs National Park, our Majestic Moon, I think it was called. And I just liked the fact that it was taken in daytime and it was a very cloudy day and the moon was shining out. So it's a straight picture. But I think it just captures the mystery of the moon. And I particularly like the moon in the phase really where it's about half full, because you get the really interesting shadows along the terminator line down here in the middle, and you'll see a lot more of the moon. And again, you're moving in a bit closer. And I just think a lot of people say, oh yeah, it's Mr. Blobby or whatever, and it just gets in the way. But I think for me, it's absolutely a beautiful thing. I never get tired of it. It's annoying sometimes when you want to photograph something faint, but you just put up with it. And again, the moon, I think that was possibly taken with an iPhone through my C8. I was playing around, showing the neighbours. The neighbour's daughter was very interested in astronomy. So she was about 14 or 15 at the time, I suppose, so came around with her dad. I had the C8 set up and they looked at the moon, and it turns out it was astrology she was interested in, not astronomy. So we can't win them all. And again, trying to get some sort of mineral moon effect, but again, very strong shadows all the way around on the right-hand side here, giving like a very gnarled effect of the mountains and the craters. Slightly different view of the moon. This is a single shot. I wonder how many of you were actually out in January 2019 when we had a full lunar eclipse. It was so cold that night. I was out with Worthing Astronomers. This is the first time I went out with Worthing Astronomers. And it was so cold that night. My car completely iced over, and I had trouble actually opening my car doors because the ice had frozen solid. But it was a beautiful night. We were up until about 4 in the morning, I think. So this was the phase of the full eclipse where the moon goes red, which is why it's known as a blood moon. But then what happens is that you don't realise is that all the stars come up because of the ambient light from the moon shining goes, so you can see all the stars. So this was taken with a simple Skywatcher tracker, I think with about a 4-second exposure. So and it's just, everybody sees pictures of the moon, everybody sees pictures of stars, but you don't very often see pictures of the moon with stars unless you fake it and sort of add the stars later. I still enjoy seeing that. Moving on to a few star constellations. Again, when I started, these look dreadful these days because there's lots of walking noise and things like that in there. But it's a start, and when you are so pleased when you actually capture anything. So I think this was with this 80 to 200mm lens on a tripod, maybe with the old Skywatcher tracker. And it's a Pleiades, of course. But you get better, you learn, you start trying to work out why you've got all the little green bits of noise here and what's going on. So you learn about filters, you learn about camera sensors, you learn about processing. And then the rabbit hole journey starts. This is, again, a very early picture. I think I'd only been moved into our house about 2 or 3 weeks. And one of the forums was saying, oh, there's a comet. I can't remember the name of the comet. I do apologise. There's a comet out tonight, and you can capture it. It's going near the Pleiades, and you can capture it with a 200mm lens. So that was my first comet, my first ever comet picture, which I was quite pleased with at the time. That was Mars near the Pleiades, and again, a very short image. You can see that this is taken with a camera lens because you've got the diffraction spikes, which are showing with the aperture helix, whatever it's called, giving you star spikes around. But I was quite pleased with that. But you move on, you develop what you're doing, and then you start getting things like this, which work a little bit better. And I think that was probably with my eBay special lens, and you start understanding what you're doing about pulling out the nebulosity and things like that. And then we were talking earlier about Orion, and going back to Orion, and again, dreadful now, but you look at some of the very early pictures, and the fact that you actually captured anything at all, because it's all so new and so exciting, was amazing. And from this, you think, well, why is it purple? Then you learn about apo correcting filters and stuff like that, because mine was a achromatic lens, not an apochromatic, so I was getting color fringing and halos and things like that. So again, you learn and you move on, and then you work on it a little bit, and then you get better. So you got a reasonably nice picture of the Orion Nebula with the Running Man Nebula, and so you develop your work. You then start going down the slippery slope of processing software. For the record, I use 3 really at the moment. I use Astro Pixel Processor to process my images and to stack them. And what I've done in the past is I put them into Photoshop and Lightroom, the Adobe suite really, and correct them through that. I've never really used things like Deep Sky Stacker for deep sky stuff, simply because before I was an astronomer, I was a Mac user, and you can't get Deep Sky Stacker and stuff like that works with a Mac. So short of buying a new PC, just for astronomy, I had to make do with what I had. So APP works for me. More recently, I'm starting to play around with pixel sites, but it's driving me mad at the moment because I'm trying to do different things, which I'll explain a little bit later, the sort of directions I'm moving in now. Again, one of the things I always wanted to do was take a picture of the Horsehead Nebula, because I've seen pictures, and to somebody who's interested in astronomy, this seems like a completely impossible challenge. But it's doable, and it's doable. I mean, you can do it with a smart scope now, and it's become, in the last 5 years, the industry and the hobby has changed so dramatically. This is just almost run of the mill now, but it still gives me a thrill when you look at it. And the first time you do it yourself, it may be a million people may have done it, but the first time you do it, it becomes very special. And this one is a particular favourite of mine. This is the Horsehead. Again, I'm playing around with the colours. The Flame Nebula looks on fire. And I made a difference, very much so, in making the hydrogen alpha gases round behind the veil as that orange colour, because I just wanted to experiment with different colours. And that picture actually got published in a book about, well, I got reminded the publishing date was, or the launch party was 4 years ago today, apparently. It was a book completely about Orion. It's called Stars of Orion by a guy called Andy Oppenheimer, who is known as the persona of Orion. You may have seen him at some of the shows if you go. He was looking for about 4 or 5 people to contribute to a small book. He got over 40 astronomers that contribute. So I was quite pleased that they actually made it into print. But again, I still enjoy seeing that because I just like the colours. I've dabbled around a little bit with planetary and solar photography. Planetary photography is my nemesis. I'll admit to that. I'm absolutely dreadful at it, but I'm getting slightly better at it. So just some early stuff. This was fun. The bottom right-hand corner. This was easy to do because it was in the daytime. And Worthing Astronomers had an outreach day, and it was a transit of Mercury across the sun, about 2020, I think. So you can see the tiny little dot, which is Mercury. But I've also played around with Mars on the top right-hand corner, Saturn, obviously Jupiter, and the Sun using white light filters. And again, it's all very challenging. I find solar very challenging, certainly with white light, because it's also bright. You can't actually see anything on the laptop, so you have to get underneath a blanket in order to see something, or move to a darkened room. And as we were discussing earlier, planetary for me is quite tricky because I work hard at it, but it doesn't seem to work for me. But I'm getting through some strategies, which I'll show you some of the images later. I was particularly pleased with this one. This actually got published in Sky Night magazine in around about 2022 or 23, I think. There is an app called something like ISS Solar Finder. So it'll actually tell you when the ISS is making passes and whether or not it's going to go across the sun or the moon. And if it's going a near pass, you can actually pull up a map and it will show you the line of transit. And as it happened on this day, the line of transit was about 5 or 6 miles away from where I live. So I picked up the cameras. This wasn't Astro cameras, this was just my Olympus with a 300mm lens on, and went to a bridge on the River Ada, just north of Shoreham. So as I say, about 5 miles from where I lived. And I waited. And I've tried this thing before and failed miserably because with something like an SLR camera, if you set it on the motor drive, if you set it off too early, what happens is the buffer fills up and then it slows down. So you've got to time it so that the motor drive is actually running at full speed, which was, I think, 15 frames a second. So I actually, on my phone, I actually got an atomic clock app. So I knew exactly to the second when this was going to go across. and I knew it was going to take less than half a second to go across the full disk of the sun. So I just hit it up with that half a second to go, and got lots and lots and lots of frames with nothing in it, and then I think 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 frames with the ISS in it. And the ISS has got a particular, it's at a weird angle, so it just looks like something different. So I played around with Photoshop. I googled how to merge items onto it, and I'm really pleased with that. And just a white light filter, and I sent that off to Sky at night, and I'm pleased to say they published it. So another slight claim to fame. The Rosette Nebula, obviously, we mentioned it, that red smudge to the left of Orion. I'm particularly pleased with this one. This took forever, and this broke my computer. This is a seven-panel mosaic of the nebula, and with a center image, which I wasn't happy with because this was done on my 200mm Newtonian. So the center image didn't give me enough of the whole nebula, so I had to do another 6 frames around it, put it all into Astro Pixel processor, and it took 24 hours to actually process it. I then spoke to the guys who developed the software at the European Astro Fest. They said, oh, if you just process them as individual ones and put them together, it would take 10 minutes. But I got a new computer out of it, so I was quite pleased. So I was quite pleased about the detail of this, and it really looks nice as an A2 image. So I can print an A2 here, so it really does look quite nice. But I'm quite pleased with the details, especially here around the Bok globules and the detail there, and it's almost got like a 3D effect. Christmas Tree Nebula, again, some of these I will be revisiting soon. And again, I'm sure you've all seen this and photographed this, and I want to try this again. This Co-Nebula and the Christmas Tree Nebula, but I want to try and get a better definition of this, and I may try using the new narrowband techniques that are now out. The Heart Nebula, I produced that on, I think I did that on Valentine's Day one year. I would probably, and I want to go back to this. This is several years old now, but I definitely want to go back now. I've got a wider field rig, which I want to get the heart and soul into one, or at least as a maximum a 2-panel mosaic, and then process that. But it is just astonishing, the shapes, isn't it? And I love the fact that it's so literal. It looks like a heart, so it's the Heart Nebula. Pelican Nebula, again, quite very, very dominant in hydrogen alpha, so very red, but the stars are at least still white. And again, I want to go back and combine this with like sulfur 2 and O3, just to, because I've got the base details now, so I can go back and pull out more details. What I do like about this, though, I love the meerkat here. Once you see the meerkat face, you can never unsee him. Helix Nebula, I believe. Again, that was taken with 200, I think, possibly the 130. Can't remember exactly one. But again, some astonishing shapes out there, some astonishing details. And I love just going out, picking the subject and taking pictures and processing them. So the basic processing for me is put it all into Astro Pixel processor with the calibration frames. That spits out a finished article or a working file, effectively. I then do gradient removals, I do background cleanup, I then put it into Photoshop, and I play around with levels and curves, and sometimes saturation, until I'm happy with what finally comes out. I wanted to. The reason I put the Cygnus wall in, I was particularly taken with that picture, and I wanted to do my own version of it. And I did this a couple of summers ago. And I would probably do, I think that this was possibly soon after I got my 2600 Duo camera. It's it can be better, I know that, but I'm still pleased with the way the colours came out, and I was deliberately trying to do something a little bit different to try and get away from the predominantly red pictures that a lot of people get. I know people, who are superb at narrowband imaging with monochrome, like your own Kevin, and it's it works really well. But I've never really explored that side until I've started to explore a little bit, but in colour, not in monochrome. Since my original fuzzy blobs of comets, I've had a little bit more success with comets. I think this one was one of the original ones. I can't remember which one it was. Again, Ponsbrook possibly or something like that. But I clearly remember taking this one. I was actually leaning on my back garden fence using the fence to support the camera and taking several pictures and merging them. And you've got the nucleus there, you've got the tail, and you've got the slight iron tail as well. So I'm quite pleased with the way that came out. Couple more comets over the years. I missed this latest one. When it was at its peak, I was actually on holiday in New Zealand, so I never actually got to see the latest comet in its glory. So, but I'll be up and ready for the next one. And again, a slightly fuzzier one. I know it's got some dust spots on it, but I'm not bothered about that. It was picking that up with a faint trail. So that was a very bright core, but a very, very faint tail. Whirlpool Galaxy. Sorry, or Pinwheel, one of the two. I can never remember. Kevin will correct me later, I'm sure. But just getting a little bit deeper into deep sky stuff. Again, probably using something like an L Pro filter. Again, since I've taken these, I've started developing into different filters, but I've just had less time to actually get out and do the imaging, and less weather as well. The weather for the last 3 years has been appalling. Bose Galaxies and Bose Galaxy on the left and Cigar Galaxy. I always find this pairing fascinating, and I think they're beautiful. And I just need to go back and spend more time on doing these. I think for me, as I say, I live on the edge of town, so I've got a dark skies, but I live on the edge of the South Downs, so I think there's a bit of a climate there. So people could be in Worthing Town Centre and be crystal clear, whereas I'll have cloud. So it tends to vary a bit. Mark chain, which I think is fascinating. Just this galaxy is just marching into the distance and all the way around here and up and they just keep going. I think that's a summer target. And again, summer targets are a bit difficult for me because he's quite light until dark or until very late. So you're quite limited in what you can do. But yeah, very bright galaxies. I've never really seen much definition in any of these. I'd love for somebody to prove me wrong, but they tend to be very bright galaxies for me. We move on to the Veil Nebula, which is a sort of summer, early autumn target. So I think this is the Eastern Veil, and again, this was taken a while back just to test the filter, I think. So I was testing possibly an L Enhance or an L Extreme filter, one of the two. But I just love the colours that comes out naturally in this without having to work very hard at it. And of course, its sister, the Western Veil or the Witch's Broom Nebula, works, I think, quite effectively as well. So sort of the colours, the reds and the greens. This is possibly taken with the Antlier tri-band RGB ultra filter, and it just works. More recently, I've been trying to do a mosaic of the Veil Nebula, not been particularly successful with the software, and which is why one of the reasons I want to experiment with PixInsight. And so I got so fed up trying to do mosaics, I actually got a wider field camera, so wide field scope. So this is my first light, just a few light frames with a 230mm focal length scope, a little ASCAR FR8 2:30. And I'm looking forward to. I'm doing a bit of work on it at the moment to get it running as I want it. But I'm looking forward to doing some wide field stuff on Orion certainly, and something where you've got a lot more room around it. I'm sort of moving away a little bit from getting in very tight to everything to moving to moving out a little bit and getting more detail. Plus, I'm struggling with mosaics as well. But I just enjoyed the wide field of this. And it's a cracking little lens as well. It's very similar to the Red Cat 51. Elephant trunks nebula. I've always wanted to photograph. This was with the. I picked up a 130 PDS from somebody within Worthing Astronomers for about. He was selling it originally for about £250 with several accessories, including a comma corrector. And I didn't need a comma corrector because I'd already got one for my other Newtonian, or for the camera rig. And then he didn't sell it. Then about a year later, he put it on again. He's selling the scope for 75 quid. So I actually bought it for 75, and he threw the comma corrector in anyway. So, which I haven't used, as I say, because I've got one anyway. But I find the 130 is a fantastic little scope. It's only 650mm long, and it tends to be my main scope on the pier. It's the one that's sitting on the pier at the moment. I love it, absolutely love it. And I'm trying some more adventurous stuff at the moment with it. The monkey head nebula, you can see the brow of the monkey there and his mouth and the thoughtful face on him. Very good description on why it's called the monkey head nebula, because it looks like a monkey's head. This, I believe it's the Flaming Star Nebula. And again, this is just like, I love the here, the curtain, the veil coming down. I've got a couple of the bubble nebula in tonight, so this is one of them. I think this is just awesome, and the fact that if you're traveling at the speed of light, to go from there to there will take you 5 years, because it's five light years across. I think that's just astonishing that space is so vast, but it's so beautiful, and it's an ever-expanding ball of gas due to a star that exploded thousands of years ago. Crescent Nebula, or sort of the Brain Nebula, and I went for the processing in slightly different colours, bringing out within Astro Pixel processor. You can do a process that will you can extract the hydrogen and the oxygen out. You can't, and then recombine them. So you can't get a true Hubble palette, but you can start playing with the colours. And I tend to like the yellows and the ochres and the browns that it tends to produce. And then we move on to like modern technology. We've got a little section here which is all smart scope orientated, and on the left you've got the Sea Star, which is obviously from ZWO. You've got the Dwarf Lab, which is two hugely popular scopes. Got Celestron Origin, which is, and you may have seen when I was doing, when I was visible, I've got an Origin in the background, which keep on flickering in and out of focus. And you've got the Unistellars here. I've used all four because one of the things I do, I've got a small part-time job working at 365 Astronomy. So I've played around with some of these things, and I sort of take the Origin to the shows, and then I could talk to people about the sort of images that I do with it. So if you ever ring 365 on a Wednesday or a Thursday between 10:30 and 2:30, you'll more than likely get me. It's an interesting job. I mean, before I worked for Zoltan, I was a customer. Well, I still am a customer, but I then helped at some of the shows, and I've been helping at the shows for about 4 years now. So you may have seen, some of you may have seen me at the shows as well. But what you can do now with some of these is astonishing. And I've got a few images that, again, I don't have a lot of time to play with these, but I've used, actually, as I say, I've used all of these at some stage. So, Sea Star Sun, straight picture. I think this is a video, and then the video was stacked. And I think it just, for somebody who's never seen the sun before, to be able to get the sunspots and stuff like that, and some of the granularity, and only you've got slightly over sharpening around the edges, but it doesn't really matter. But it's still the fact that you're potentially, for somebody who's never seen something like this before, this is an absolute revelation to them. You can do other things, like you can do videos with it as well. So, for example, if I can, sorry, need to. Just need to. Oh, here we go. Right. So, in March this year, I'm sure you're aware there was a partial eclipse of the sun. And so one of the things I love doing, as I mentioned earlier, is sort of public engagement events. So Worthing Astronomers were on Worthing Seafront with some light cloud going through. So I had the Sea Star running on time lapse, and I had my Celestial C8 with an eyepiece in it with a solar filter on the front, so people could just look at the scope. And as I said, we probably had 15 or 20 scopes there that day, so we saw several hundred people, and I love the fact that that's so easy to do. I think that was just an exposure every 5 seconds, set on auto exposure, auto focus, and let it run. Right, moving on. We mentioned the moon earlier, and again, these are things that are taken with mainly the Sea Star, I think. So that was picking up at the mineral colours there. That's converted to monochrome. But again, the Sea Star in particular, for me, fits the size and size of the moon and the sun particularly well. So it does work very well for those. This was the moon. I think it was last year, about September. There was a partial eclipse of the moon. So this was part of the partial eclipse here. This is about maximum at about 2 in the morning, and I was supposed to go to sleep and then get up at about 1:30 to go and photograph it. And I was lying there worrying. I was worrying that the moon would actually drop below my neighbour's apple tree, but luckily it didn't. So it went between a gap in between the apple tree and the house. So I was still able to image it. Orion Nebula. This was taken with the Origin. And again, I think all these smart scopes. I know you can get equatorial wedges now, but I always use them in the pure alt-as mode because that's their basic configuration. If I want to do EQ, I'll use more capable equipment. But for what it does, it's brilliant. I think these are like 15-second exposures, about 50 or 60 of those, and it just builds up the detail. And for a smart scope, they're just amazing. I left this in because I wanted to show, this was with the dwarf. As an illustration, I actually asked it to do a mosaic mode so that you can see how the mosaic is building up. And basically what it does, it starts in the middle and it works round in a curve, and it starts filling all the gaps. If I'd left it longer, it would have filled more of the gaps. And you can see that how noisy it is on the outside, but the more exposures you get, the cleaner that image will be, and the more complete the image will be. And as an example, there's Andromeda. It's okay as a picture. I've done better with Andromeda. I mean, hope to show you something a bit later, but it needs more data, it needs more information, so it needs to be out there a lot longer and probably better processed as well. This is the Lagoon Nebula. I included this for one reason. This is the one astro picture I took that was any good on a 2-week holiday to New Zealand. My son lives out there. We went to visit him and I took a dwarf with me. But the weather wasn't very conducive. I never got to the dark sky area because I had 90-mile-an-hour winds that night. But so I had to contend with one night on the Lagoon Nebula. Again, it brings back a memory of going there and taking something. It's not just about getting the fantastic images, it's sometimes about the people that you're with. So I remember that this was on the top of my son's sloping conservatory roof, and I was terrified that any gust of wind would blow the dwarf off, but it didn't, and it was okay. The Helix Nebula, I think. No, Crab Nebula, sorry. This was on the Origin. So again, I think this is just playing around with post-processing, but you know, I mean, the Origin is a very capable scope because it's a RASA, it's an f2.2 aperture, so it's a very fast scope. So a 15 seconds on an f7 lens will get you a lot less detail than 15 seconds on an f2.2. So about 3 or 4 stops faster. So it's really excellent at gathering the light and gathering the data. Oh, I said I'd come back to the bubble nebula, which we have done here. So this, I mean, ignore the left-hand side and the corners. I left those in because I left those in deliberately. So I wanted to show you that those are like the edges that will be built up. They can always be cropped out, but for a 15-second exposures on an alt-az, I think that's a really capable picture of the bubble nebula, especially if you start cropping it in a bit. And I think that works incredibly well. And bubble is still one of my favourite targets, I think. This is the Sol Nebula. I was playing around with that. I haven't actually processed them yet, but I'm playing around with 2 targets at the moment. I'm playing around with the Wizard Nebula, and I'm playing around with the Heart Nebula. But what I'm doing is I've got one of these O3S2 filters to go with my hydrogen alpha filter. So I should be able to create a Hubble palette. I just need to work out the methodology of doing it. But so I've got the base data, but I just need to sit down and play around with the data. But this was, again, this was with the Origin. So a smart scope and not a massive astro rig. It can go wrong. Of course, you've got the nebula here, and of course you've got the streaks and satellite. And I put the picture of the satellite on the right-hand side just to remind you that the skies are getting very crowded, people, aren't they? Starlink looks amazing and it looks great when it comes over and the rocket burns its fuel, but they are becoming a source of light pollution. Just a few pictures, getting near the end, I think. The moon with Venus, I think one night, it was just looking beautiful, just hanging out there in the garden. So I always, I've always got a camera out, being a photographer, always got a camera around somewhere. So just go out, stick it on a tripod and take a picture. Doesn't matter if it's not sharp, it evokes a memory of what you did and where you are. A couple of pictures, as I say, slightly better images now of Jupiter. That's probably I think my best image of Jupiter so far, and that was with the Newtonian with a Barlow. So it seemed to suit the faster aperture seemed to suit the pixel size in the camera I was using at the time. Got Mars on the right hand side, and you got very small Venus there as well. Just a few of the moon again. Again, I can't resist it. I think the moon is beautiful, and especially along the Terminator line there. And then what you can get, sometimes you get lucky. So I actually managed to photograph the Lunar V and the Lunar X that night. So as you can see, the X is there at the bottom of the bottom middle of the picture, and it's the light just hitting the craters in a certain way that it creates what to us are familiar shapes, and you've got the V there and the X there. Just a few, very few. We're getting near the end of tonight, and happy to take questions afterwards. Was out one night with an astro group. It wasn't my own. I was helping out, and they had a nifty 50 night. So this was taken with a 50mm lens, just I don't know 10 seconds somewhere up in the northeast, and you've got this little smudge here, which is Andromeda. So this is the first time people see something like Andromeda. You get a bit more experience, you get a bit of processing behind your belt, and you can then get something like that. Again, it's, that was a pivotal moment for me. That was the start of realizing what I could actually do. But be aware, this is hurtling towards us. This is 2.5 million light years away, and it will hit us in a few billion years' time, and it will merge with our Milky Way galaxy. Can you just imagine the pictures that you get when it gets a bit closer? So finally, just a couple of things. I mentioned outreach quite a bit. Here's just some pictures of Worthing Astronomers on the beach. That's what's set up in the foreground. We get to go to a country house occasionally where they do an amazing hot chocolate. And I think the bottom right-hand one, well, both of the two on the beach are the Observe the Moon nights. So if you're ever in Worthing and you hear about us down there, or if you're never in Worthing, always try to get involved in outreach. It's well worth doing it just for the wows and the Saturn moments that people get from you sharing your passion with them. So thank you for listening. Keep looking up, and happy to take questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Graham. It's Kevin here.
Hi, Kevin.
Lovely presentation. Really enjoyed that. Just a question. For you, what do you think is next? Because we always aspire to do something more, don't we? And scope and bigger camera or whatever. What have you got on your shopping list next? What you want to do?
Well, what I'm actually doing at the moment, three things really. Well, four things. Number one being trying to find more time.
Yeah.
I'm a bit restricted sometimes because we've got a lovely dog, Collie, who wants to be outside with me all the time. And she becomes known as Astro Dog. But then if she hears a fox or an owl, she'll bark, and we can't have that at 1 in the morning. So it does restrict me a little bit in terms of going out. But she's pretty good normally. So more time would be one. Second, I'm playing around with. I've got the L Symphony filter, Synergy, the L Synergy filter, which is an O3 S2 filter, which I'm going to combine with my L Extreme to create color Hubble palettes. So you can split the HAO3 and S2 out from the color images, and then in Pixel Sight take out the stars, recombine them again, and work on the nebulosity and add channels. I just haven't worked out the whole process yet. So I'm doing quite a lot of that sort of stuff. I want to revisit some old things, but do them much better now. And I think I've learned patience now, because before I was happy to go and grab an image and wanted an entire image finished in a night. But now I realize you can't do that, and I'm on the Wizard Nebula. I've been gathering data. We had some clear skies last night, so I'm gathering data on 3 or 4 nights. So I'm focusing more on one bigger project over a long period of time to get high quality. And the third thing is I'm going to start playing around with solar, but with hydrogen alpha solar. So I want to see if I can crack that and understand it better. Because I mean, you see the images of people like Gary Palmer, and they're just astonishing. And I'd like to be able to do some of that.
But we should speak to Stephen because he's very good at solar.
Oh, is he? Oh, excellent, good. I'll add him as a friend in Facebook then.
Yeah.
And of course, people like in UK Cloud Magnets, you get some very inspirational stuff in there. Yours included, of course, Kevin. But you get some really good stuff in Cloud Magnets and some of the other forums, and you learn from talking to people. And it's such an accessible, friendly hobby. People are always willing to give their time to help others.
And that's what I was saying earlier, Graham. We're all over the country. There's not many people that are local to each other, so we do it online. And I certainly have learned most of my stuff online for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean the early days. I mean, Astro Backyard was a staple diet for me.
Yeah.
But he was very good in the early days for me. But the Space Koala, I think, is doing some quite good stuff. I saw that she'd done this review. We talked about that new camera. She's done a review on that new Hove camera, so I want to see what that looks like. So that looks quite an interesting camera. But yeah, just pick the people that you want to learn from. It's like in one of my other hobbies a couple of other hobbies is canoeing and archery. It's exactly the same in canoeing and archery. There is so much crap out on the internet, or dross rather, I should say. You just need to be very careful who you want to learn from, because some people give bad information. But if you find somebody that gives the information that works for you, stick with them.
Yeah, definitely good advice.
I've got a question.
Yep.
Of the 4 new ones that you tried out, which did you find was the best one?
What, of the smart scopes?
Yes.
For me, the Origin, the Celestron Origin. I like the Sea Star because I use the ASI app as my main imaging tool, and the Sea Star has got a very similar look and feel to it. So I found it really easy to get used to and to image straight away. The Dwarf I found wasn't quite as intuitive. For me, I mean, other people, I mean, I've got people in our club who've been like beta testers for the new Dwarf Mini, and they're just, what they produce with the Dwarf is incredible. It's the only scope they've got. So, but for them it works. But for me, in terms of it's the image quality. I mean, like the Bubble Nebula, I think that's just superb from a smart scope. But it sort of does bridge the gap because it's quite an expensive scope. It's on the upper end in terms of price for smart scopes, but you get what you pay for. And it's got the upgradability. Now they've now brought out a new camera for it. So if you wanted to upgrade to a newer camera, you can do so.
Can you put it on an equatorial mount as well? Is there
yes. Yeah, you can do that with all of them nowadays. I think you can get equatorial wedges, but I've not gone down that route for 2 reasons. One, because I'd rather keep it pure and simple with the smart scopes. If I want to do stuff on equatorial mounts, I'll use my equatorial mounts, but because I've got the luxury of having those as well. Because I mean, it's the setup time as well. I like smart scopes because with the Celestron, you put the tripod out, you level it roughly, you bolt the mount on, put the scope on, make sure it's roughly balanced, and then turn it on and point it at the sky, and it will automatically work out where it is. It will work out the focus, and will do it all for you, and then it's ready to image. So I'd rather do that than mess around and restrict myself to 15-second bites of images, rather than worry about equatorial mount. Because, as I say, if I want to use an equatorial mount, I go to the pier in the observatory and use my 200 PDS. Anybody else?
Okay, well, does anyone else have any questions? I think we're there. Graham, thank you very much. It was a fantastic presentation. Really,
Okay, thank you.
really interesting.